All right, hello and welcome to the Utah Puck Report. We keep getting to meet our new NHL players, NHL Utah, Utah in the NHL, and now we have an amazing opportunity to meet our GM, Bill Armstrong. Bill, how are you? Thanks for being on the show. First off,
Well, Jay, thanks for having me. So excited to be a part of this. It has been so exciting to go through this, and I can't tell you how excited we are as an organization to be in Utah, and it's a great thing. And the love the people of Utah have showed us has been incredible.
yeah, I mean, we've been waiting for this for a long time, and many people like myself, we were just hoping to get back into the AHL. NHL wasn't even a dream of ours, so to have you guys here now is surreal to us.
Yeah.
And I've known of you for a long time before you were a GM, and let's do a quick introduction so that Utah gets to know a little bit about you. Can you take us back to where you're from? I know what kind of player you were, but will you kind of
Yeah.
tell Utah what kind of player you were?
Well, I wasn't pretty. I was mean. I was really mean if I could get there, you know. So I was like a big defenseman that played really a team game, lived through his teammates, would defend his teammates, and host the rookie party, the Christmas party, the Halloween party, and make sure all my teammates were always taken care of. And I always thought, when you saw your teammate, in the future that they'd want to hug you, because they knew how loyal you were and what you did for them. And so I always had that. And hockey was a huge part of my life. Funny story was my dad was from a really, really big hockey town where Bobby Orr's from. And my dad was so busy working, trying to provide for the family, forgot to sign me up for hockey. And in our neighborhood, I can remember on a Saturday, all these kids, there was massive kids my age in the neighborhood, all got their hockey bags and going to hockey. I was like, what's going on here as a kid, So finally I kind of clued in. I'm like, hey, listen, I want to play hockey. And my dad's like, yeah, we don't have time right now. I'm too busy or whatever. And so he said, go do a year of figure skating, so I did, and came back to him the next year. I want to play hockey. And it's the greatest thing that he ever did because he made me want it. He made me appreciate how hard it is to pay for the equipment and the ice time and all that stuff. So when I got to my first hockey game, I went out there like it was war, and those poor little 7-year-olds took a savage beating that day. But it was really, I had a love for the game from all the way through, and that hasn't changed. I'm 54 years old right now, and my love for the game hasn't changed. It's only increased.
From originally, where did you grow up?
Richmond Hill, Ontario, which is about it's just a suburb of Toronto. It was a really great place to grow up. It's kind of a mix of farmland and community, and everything revolved around the ice rink.
That sounds amazing. So you're saying from day one at 7 years old, you already knew you're the brute force guy.
Yeah. I mean, oh yeah, no, I knew that. It wasn't done through skill. It was outworking people, and I was just so much bigger than everybody, and that's my thing. I just tried to outwork people from the get go, and that didn't change. I have the same philosophy nowadays, so it hasn't really changed for me. But yeah, that was my thing. Just trying to outwork people and make them pay a little bit of a price at the same time.
So at what age did you think you could start doing this for a living? Did you get drafted in the Bantam Draft, or when were you first noticed? Or
Yeah, so I was playing in Richmond Hill, and one of the kids in the neighborhood, he was a star. He kind of had the golden path. He was drafted early into the OHL, to the Oshawa Generals. He had an agent, and the agent was Anton Thun, and he saw me play in the same rink, and he said, "Listen, you're going to get drafted into the OHL. You just got to continue to work on your game a little bit." So he kind of inspired me, and then the ratings came out. I was rated pretty high, so I was lucky enough to have real good coaching. I went out to Barrie. It's about 45 minutes outside of Toronto, and there was a guy named Mike McCann, and he kind of groomed me a little bit and kind of shaped me. And then I got drafted in the OHL into the Toronto Marlies, which is a pretty prestigious franchise at the time, and I ended up working my way through there into Oshawa, which was the #1 ranked team in Canada at the time, and Lindros and the boys were there, so I ended up somehow weaseling my way on that team, which is a pretty good ride for us. We went on to win the Morrill Cup, and I went from being undrafted to drafted, 46 overall in the draft. So it was a great ride, and again, it was just about being a great teammate, and making sure your teammates were taken care of, and being part of that team was a special year in my life.
What's it like playing with a guy like at that age to go play with a guy like Eric Lindros, who's getting all media attention available, and to know? And did you protect Eric Lindros?
I did. He went to fight once, and he knocked the kid out, and I said, "Don't you ever do my job again." So he was great because we loved attention back then. And when we went to the rinks, they were all packed. When he showed up, he was like the next Gretzky or Lemieux, and it was just crazy the amount of attention that he brought to our team, and we loved it. We loved every minute of it, and he was such a hard worker. People don't realize how hard he was. Like he every practice was like war, but in a good way. And he made us all better. And I think when they made that trade for Lindros, that was kind of the moment that inside that locker room was like, okay, they're going for it here, And they passed out these shirts that said "Running Down a Dream," and it
Oh,
kind of planted a seed in our head, and we never looked back.
wow, that's amazing. Someday I'm really gonna want to sit and talk to you about all that, because man,
Yeah.
that's a whole episode all on its own. Just those years.
Yeah.
Isn't it weird for a guy like you, your size and everything? Back in the '90s, weren't you almost always? It seemed like the WHL always went for the 6'5" guys, right?
Yeah. I mean, my size kind of got me over the hump in getting noticed, and I think my how hard I played the game. And as it went along, I even learned to play harder. Because there's a fighting component that comes in when you're that big. Everybody looks around and says, "Hey, you know, you're supposed to do something." So and that was a tough league back in the day where you had Domi and there's a couple other guys that were pretty big names, Louis DeBrusque and Troy Crowder, and those guys. It wasn't a fun league in some ways, but it sure did make you a
Yeah,
lot tougher.
yeah, I can only imagine. So I'm gonna skip ahead a couple things, because I'm watching
Yeah,
the NHL playoffs right now, and I'm watching how Dallas played. And now you're a GM. You played your way, and you know the importance of how you played. And then I'm
yeah.
watching a team like Dallas that I thought the only reason they're not in the final right now is because they play too soft. Like, maybe I'm wrong. I've been married long enough to realize I'm wrong most of the time. But it seemed to me like they played a little soft. Do you think there is still room and need for a guy like how you play the game? And it seems to be like
Oh,
other guys are filling that role.
yeah, yeah. Listen, that role's got a lot harder because penalties, right? You can't take penalties. There's no clutching and grabbing, and to play big and play hard, there's a line you have to walk in the playoffs. And one of the reasons Dallas didn't win, they went 0 for on their power play. You can't go
Yeah.
0 for in an entire series. I like the way that they're built. They're built through the draft and a little bit of free agency and some older guys that they added. They had a nice little mix. But Edmonton was pretty dominant on the power play. They
Yeah.
didn't miss anything. But I think the game's always changing. There's always trends in the game that are coming your way, as and you're trying to look for them and kind of tweak your team all the time to continue. Like one day there was 3 fighters on your team, and then you woke up one day and there was none. The game is always changing. One day everybody's like, "Oh, we like the big guy," and everybody's getting big guys, and then they couldn't skate. And then the game got faster with the new rules, and then you wake up the next day and like, okay, you got to adjust. So the game is always changing, and if you ever get a chance to read Scotty Bowman's book, it talks about the way the game was played in the 20s and the 40s and then the 60s and then the 70s, and it evolved. And as a GM, you always have to stay on top of that because the game is constantly changing. But they're not making the rinks any bigger, so you're just looking for big, deep defensemen that can be mobile and walk that line of not taking bad penalties. But it's hard to replace size back there. There's just some positions that need size and grit and toughness, and that's one of the positions at D. And obviously the size of the goalies has changed over the years too. So there's certain things that as a GM you have to really pay attention to and try and build your team accordingly. I think our advantage in Utah, and I don't know people kind of have a understanding of the way our team has been built, but we took on some bad contracts for a long time, and to get draft picks and draft our way out of this and build the proper team the right way. So not only could we be good, but we can be good for a while. And that takes some patience. And when you watch the playoffs, you realize that all those guys like Ryan Hart, McDavid, Drysdale, all those guys, they're in their 10th year, and the Barkoffs of the world, and that they're still really good players, but they've played in the grind of the NHL for a while. There's not many guys that can really stand out when they're that young and that grind. It's a hard grind, and it's a small window for your players to actually be their best and be their best in the playoffs.
Yeah, that gets brought up a lot, right? The window of competitiveness, as far as like when you're in a rebuild or when you should really be competing to go deep. And you talk about it like, yeah, they're going to draft. Now you look for 6'5" goaltenders and then just hope to teach them the position down the road, right? And
Yeah.
we've seen that a lot with the draft, and sometimes I haven't really seen it work out that great. But you got to be, if you're a GM and you see a guy like you, a 6'5" mobile defenseman that's plays rough, that's got to be your top pick, right? Like you still want that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of there's a lot of the draft is, as someone said to me when I became the head scout at one time, you have the toughest job in hockey. It's a hard, because sometimes what's available to you where you're picking in the draft, you might have just drafted 5 good defensemen, the year before, and now you've got to switch to looking at whatever is available. But sometimes it's size, sometimes it's skill, sometimes it's really looking and projecting way out there. And sometimes people don't see that when you're the head scout. They see, okay, and they read all the mock drafts, and like, why did they take that guy? And then 4 years later they're on board with you. They're like, yeah, they made the right pick. So there's a lot of different things that go into the draft. I really like our staff. We've tried to get 2 of the best with Ryan Jankowski and Daryl Plandowski to come in there and lead the troops there and really teach and grow our group. And I think they've done an amazing job.
Yeah, when I look over your roster and I see a couple of the bad contracts you're talking about, like you still have Shea Weber, who will probably never play again. But I see what you did. Like, right, you're looking for, okay, at the time we had money, we weren't willing to, I don't know how to say this politically correct, but let's just say we can eat some contracts while getting some draft
Yeah,
picks and hoping for the future.
yeah,
Okay, so that's that. I want to skip back a little bit too. I want to talk about how you worked your way up because you played in the A,
yeah.
um, and then as you grinded it out in the A, and I saw you had a ton of penalty minutes in the A, so which was good. Like back then, I knew who you were back then. I was even an e-bug back then in the AHL, so I kind of knew who you were back then, and we watched you kind of come up, and then you become that scout. That wasn't that your first non-player
So
position?
yeah, so what happened was, I was kind of almost getting to the point where I was 28 years old. I don't know if I could have kept at that level in the American League. I wasn't making a tremendous amount. I had a house, I had 2 kids, and I almost felt like, okay, I'm going to have to drop down a level to continue to play, and I wasn't quite sure about what I wanted to do. And I had the stress of being a dad, and a husband at the same time and supporting. But I came up with this foolproof plan. I was living in Providence at the time, and I said I have enough money to get to September. And my father-in-law, wonderful man at the time, he said, "Listen, I get you a job selling cars." And I thought to myself, which is a good job. I said, but I really want to stay in hockey here. I got to figure out a way. So I just said, I'm going to wait to the last possible, paycheck runs out, and we'll go from there, And so right at the end, middle of summer, the phone rang, and it was a guy named Bob Dick, and he said, he's a reporter in town in Providence. He said, your boy Peter Laviolette, your old teammate, the guy you used to protect all the time, and he's going to get the job as head coach in Providence. And now Peter's gone on to massive success, just coached the Rangers. He's a heck of a coach. And I called him and I said, Peter, I left a voice message at the time. I said, hey, I'm your new assistant coach. I'll see you soon in a couple of weeks when when the team gets rolling or whatever. And so he called me back like a couple of weeks later and he said, yeah, that works. So
Wow.
He said, but there's only one problem. He says, you got to play a little bit too, but I can
Oh, you're
squeeze you on
Reggie
the bench as
Dunlop.
a. Yeah, so I was the last official AHL player coach. I was the last guy that actually did that job. And so we went on that year to win the Calder Cup. That was one of my first years coaching, and then I did another year as assistant. But I think at like 31, I was head coach in the American League for the Bruins, the Providence Bruins, which was a great honor. I was a little bit young to do that. But I did 2 years of head coaching there, and then I went down to the East Coast League, and I was a general manager, president of hockey ops or whatever, and coach at the same time. And so I did 2 years with the Flyers farm team, but I learned to build my teams down there. And then after that, I got into scouting. So I think, being a coach is like going to law school. Like, you need to kind of go through it. Like, it helps you, it's an advantage. And I felt like that's one of the reasons it helped me become a great scout, at the time, because I knew what it was like when you're on the bench and you had a guy with a lot of talent, but he wouldn't work, So I kind of learned all those lessons coaching and a lot about personality and managing people. And I to be honest with you, I kind of struggled. I was really young. I was really hard on my players. I thought they were me, and they weren't. And so I kind of had to take a step back, and I got into this business. I was running hockey schools in Rhode Island, and we got big, and I had like a massive staff, and they were all kids. They're all kids from high school. And Rhode Island's great because there's this beautiful beach, with the waves crashing, and like nobody really wants to go to a rink and and teach hockey school in the middle of the summer for $7 an hour. So I really had to kind of change my ways of like working with people and making it fun and just kind of like changing my philosophy about how I manage people. So I think working with the kids over the years really kind of changed me. And it was a great position to be. I would scout in the winters and teach hockey school all summer. So I was learning about managing people and scouting all winter and doing hockey 24/7, all year long in some capacity. So it was kind of my learning curve where I was always learning about hockey.
It's funny. I've talked to a couple of players lately, former NHL first round draft picks that had decent careers. And one of them is going to be in the Hall of Fame as a goaltender. And now he's trying to become a scout. And he's like, Jay, I got to tell you, you have to start all over. And he's
Oh
like,
yeah,
I almost envy the crap that I've done because I've run hockey camps here for 19 years in Utah, right?
yeah,
And I've done everything under the sun for the Utah Grizzlies. And
yeah,
he's like, if I had that now, I'd be like, people would take me more serious as a scout, but I had to start all over. And it doesn't matter what you did as a player, you have to prove it as a scout. And so
yeah.
you see the value now, right, of guys that have had to do it in the trenches, especially in the East Coast League, where you're the coach,
Oh
GM,
yeah,
the
yeah.
tape guy, like you had to do everything.
Yeah, that was probably one of the toughest jobs because you're doing immigration, you're doing housing, you're building teams. You can do all the trades and booking the buses and everything. So that job taught me a lot about how to manage, and guys don't make a lot of money down there, so you can't torture them too much, and you have to find ways to get your enthusiasm of your club revved up to play and get everybody to kind of fight together. It was a great job. I really enjoyed my time down there. But yeah, I grinded. I think that was my thing, and then I came back and got into scouting. And my first day of scouting, I'll tell you a story. Was at Marlborough in Massachusetts there, and they had all like the prep school guys, the Eastern Junior League guys, and it was kind of like the year like Keith Neando was drafted, and I went to this rink, and it housed everything. It had all the prep school guys in it. It had all the guys in the Eastern Junior. It was like a big jamboree. There were 5 rinks going at the same time. And I came home and I said to my wife, I said, like, I must not be very good at this job. I go, I didn't see one guy I liked. so, so, but it takes your eyes a while to change because I'd been used to watching pro hockey, and now, it takes your eyes, and if to be a scout, it takes you like 2 good years of scouting before you can walk in and say, oh, that guy's going in the second round, that guy's going in the first round. And it takes a while to do that. I was very fortunate. I had really good hockey people around me. I had Larry Plow, John Davidson, Jarmo Kekalainen, and hosting some great other scouts that kind of nurtured me and brought me along. And then Doug Armstrong jumped in at some point and became our GM when Larry stepped down, and then Larry came on our staff. So I was fortunate to be around some great scouts and kind of learn the business. And they were patient with me, even through the mistakes. And sometimes when you're scouting and your mistakes are your biggest, it's your biggest growth,
Oh wow, that's interesting. I've heard it compared to being a hedge fund manager because even with being a GM. This was JP Parisi kind of told me this
Yeah,
story about it. He's like, you're betting the farm on a guy that's 18 years old, and you don't know if he's gonna lose his mind over some girl back home and
yeah,
not be able to function the next year, or if maybe that 18-year-old year was his peak year and he didn't get any better. And he's like, as a scout or as a GM, like your career, your reputation rides on you deciding whether that kid's going to be able to keep his mind through the rest of
yeah,
puberty and be a good
yeah.
player. It's a lot.
It is a lot, and I think if you're a really good scout, you grow from your mistakes and continue to get better. I think it's a humbling job, but it's probably the most important job in your organization, because some scout that works in the middle of Quebec, if he finds a player in the third or fourth round that's going to be a star player, he can have massive impact on your organization. And for not only for 2 to sometimes they're there for 5 to 10 years, and they can have a massive impact. So it's tremendously important position, and it is truly one of the most important positions in our club in Utah, just with how many draft picks that we have.
Yeah, and I think about that when I think about a guy like Pavel Datsyuk. Wasn't he 8th round and now there's only 7 rounds? Like
Yeah.
you hear stories like that of a guy that somebody believed in when everybody else didn't. Before we talk about Utah, I want to talk about a little bit more of you transfer or like transitioning into being a GM. And you had are there other guys you looked up to? Like who do you pattern like as a player? You said this player did this, and I appreciate that. I'm gonna put that in my toolbox. As a
Yeah.
GM, you've got names. And you mentioned that you worked with Armstrong before, and there's other guys out there, George McPhee or Lou Lamoriello. Like who are the guys you look up to or looked up to at the time?
That's a great question. It was different things for me. I think when I was working with Peter Laviolette, he was such a great coach. You learn as much as you can, and you suck in those moments that you were with him to kind of, to learn. I've always been somebody that whoever's been around me, that's tried to learn a little bit from. So I think it went from Peter Laviolette to Jarmo Kekalainen was a unbelievable scout, that taught me probably the most. And there was other guys that are like, people wouldn't recognize the Billy Stearns of the world, but I had this guy named Serge Boudreau, and he was a local guy out of Providence, and he would sit with me and kind of explain, hey, this is how you gauge skating. Your best ability to see the skating is in between the neutral zone at this point, or just cutting hard to the net with the puck. There's just certain things that you could kind of tell, and I was always taking in different things from different people as I went through the process. And Larry Plow, I got to work around him for the majority of my career, and he now works for us in Utah. So those guys were very instrumental. Doug Armstrong was someone also working around how savvy he was, how smart he was, and just always pushing you and your staff to become better and become better at the craft and draft better. So I've been very fortunate in my career to be around some great people.
Yeah, and that building you did that all of you took place in St. Louis. That's got to
Yeah.
be you're like, hey, I've done it. I've been there. I've seen that part of it. I kind of know
Yeah.
the X factor. And is that what you bring into, or does the game change so much that what worked then doesn't work now?
No, it does. It does work. It's the same philosophy. It's the same timeline. People forget when you get into the rebuild, like, everybody's excited about it when you're taking in all these picks and you're gutting your team. But come January, nobody likes to rebuild, when you're getting trounced, 8-0 back to back. So, we had to make sure we understood, how to kind of get through it. And Larry had been through it before when he rebuilt St. Louis. So he was one of our keys to just getting in there and making sure we're always going the same way, because it's easy to change halfway through the rebuild, right? Like people get sick of it, your fans get sick of it, your owner's sick of it, your newspaper guys are sick of it. So you've got to find ways to make sure you stay the course. And he was a huge part of that. But I think, what you learn in St. Louis, it took us a long time in St. Louis to get over the hump, and be able to beat. We were playing in the first round. It was Chicago. They were going on to win cups. It was LA. They were going on to win cups. So it was truly a hard place to kind of, get out of there and get some success. And when we finally did, I think it taught us a lot to play those championship clubs early on. I think we became better at drafting. I think we became better at finding character and doing more background on the players. So I think we wouldn't have won a championship if we hadn't gone through that grind and that little bit of adversity. But I do use a lot of that in my daily thought process of building this team.
So is that something you would tell the fans now? Like, hey, it sucks when you're going through the rebuild, but there's promised land on the other end. Just bear with us.
Yes, because if you look at some of the players that we've gotten out of the rebuild, it's been impressive of the scouting staff how they've kind of linked it together, and now you're going to see the fruits of our labor. So the Utah fans are going to get a better look at it and probably get more excited about it, because they're going to see Cooley and Gunther's of the world and the Josh Doans come in and the Mosers, and they're good NHL players and only getting better. And they're young. I think that the big difference is if Utah would have got an expansion team, you would have got 28-year-olds and 29-year-olds and 33-year-olds. When Utah got this team, the advantage is that they're 23-year-olds. Now there's a little immaturity at times that our club will face because we're so young. But there's good players, and we had 7 20-goal scorers last year on our team. So there's a lot of good hope that's coming, and I think our fans are going to like the style that we play. They're going to have to be patient with us at times because we are only in our 4th year of the rebuild, and most times it's very rare that does a team ever come out of the rebuild and make the playoffs in their 4th year. It's very rare. So and sometimes they do, and then they lose the next year. So we just need some patience in getting an understanding of where our team is actually at. We're still a young team. I think last year when we finished, we were the first youngest forward group in the NHL, and we're the 2nd youngest team overall.
Wow. Yeah. I've been doing a lot of looking at that. I think you guys finished with 77 points last year, but that includes that 13-14 game skid. And that's kind of our fault too, right? That's when all the Utah talk started, and it just seems like you guys are right there. And now now you're like, hey, we know we have this core of incredible talent, and we also happen to have a ton of cap space. And now, everybody, of course, the first question everybody wants to know is, do you have your e-bug signed? And obviously we're close. But second to that is you've got all this cap space. All the other teams in the league know, and you've got Tom Fitzgerald from the Devils flat out said, "Yeah, we're willing to trade our draft picks. We need something bigger." Is everybody calling you right now saying like, "Hey, eat this contract. We have a guy that you could take for 2 years, but we want your pick, but he's a high cap space." Like, does it?
Yeah. Well,
do you have to go out and dig, or is everybody just coming to you?
Well, we always dig, right? We always try to be the hardest working club, and always finding out the different scenarios and the different options you have at the draft. Most likely we'll draft. That's the truth. But as a GM, you have to always search every day to make your club better, and maybe you can do that by trading something. But as far as taking on bad picks, we're past that for the most part. I don't see that being a part of our daily life, is taking on bad contracts. I believe we're past that. Now we're in the part where we're moving forward with our young guys, trying to support them with some older players and make them better, and kind of, improve them as fast as we can, so we can become a better team as early as we can. So I believe we're past that point of bad contracts.
Yeah, but not even bad contracts. But there are teams like Vegas, Toronto. They're already at cap space. They have nothing. They don't have any room, but they have a guy or two. Tavares, Marsh's show keeps coming up.
Yep.
Those names keep coming up. Is that, and I know you can't, I'm not trying to
Yeah,
like,
no, I mean, it's a great question, but we'll kind of proceed with caution. If we can use that to make us a better team, for sure. We can add one of those players, and they have value, and they make us better, for sure. You know what we've talked about our club is be relentless about improving the club, but not, hurting the future of the club, and that's important. Making sure that we're relentless and improving it, but it can't make us pay a price in the future for improving it today. So I think there's some room that teams are out of cap, and we can, obviously put deals together to get players that will complement our younger players and make us more competitive team. We're going to pursue those guys.
yeah, and that seems to be the big thing. And that's kind of what I've been saying on the radio side of things is when I'm asked my opinion of what I think you're going to do. I think you're going to go out and find guys that can come in and make your 1 and 2D, your 3 and 4D, so they have more time to mature. I think Jersey's
Yeah.
amazing. I, I guess I could admit this now. I've been an LA Kings fan because we have a Salt Lake guy in Trevor Lewis that has played for
Yeah,
the Kings.
yeah,
I've got
yeah,
to drink out of the cup twice thanks to Trevor
yeah,
Lewis. So I
yeah,
watched every Kings game and I watched most of the Knights games. And I've seen those players that are out there, and I think I look and I'm like, if I'm Bill Armstrong, I'm looking at a couple guys that I can bring in on a 1 or a 2 year deal. So I'm not hurting my team long term, but I'm
yep,
bringing in this seniority and this leadership that's out there.
yeah.
Um, I know I'm putting you in a corner. I'm not trying to do that. I don't want
No,
to
no.
name any names. But is that the plan? You just get a few guys and you're good
Yeah, I mean,
now.
we'll see what comes our way free agency. But listen, we've got so many options because of our cap space. We have so many options because we don't have bad contracts. This was built like this for a reason. But at the same time, you can't be foolish with it. You can't make Logan Cooley any older than he is. You can't make the tree grow. You can put the right soil, you can water it, you can give it sunshine, but you can't make that tree, become a 24-year-old oak tree overnight. So you're wasting your time trying to think you can do that. And you have to understand that it's going to take time with this team. The same time it took the St. Louis Blues, the Washington Capitals, and all these other teams that went through the process of building through the draft. It takes a little bit of time. But if you do it right and you build the right team, you can be good for a long time. And we've certainly got some tremendous prospects that are coming into the organization. And the great thing about the great fans of Utah is they're going to get to see, 1 or 2 prospects pop in every year, and they're going to fall in love with them.
Yeah, and that's one of the things, like you talk about Logan Cooley. Another saying I got from JP is there's no better teacher than the game. You
Yeah,
you can
yeah,
you can draft a kid, you can bring him in, you can teach him all you want, but the only way he grows or gets better is the amount of games they get to play in, the amount of mistakes they get to make and recover from or learn from.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
um, so 4 years of building, what do you think a typical rebuild is? How many years is a typical rebuild? Or is there a
Well,
typical?
no, it is. I mean, we study that. That's one of the things we try and do is look at the past history of the NHL. You want to try and get out of that rebuild. In your 5th year, you want to be competitive at making the playoffs, and that's our goal for our club is trying to push the pace and see if we can, get into in our 5th year, see if we can get into the playoffs. This year we're looking to take a step forward. Our whole goal this year is to get our organization to be better than they were last year and take one more step forward. We can do that as an organization. We're going to be a competitive, fun young club to watch, and with an opportunity in the 5th, 6th years to make the playoffs.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing. And I think the fans of Utah are excited about it. I think a majority of them don't really understand what they have coming, the amount of talent you guys have and how young they are. And
Yep.
you look at a guy like Clayton Keller who looks like a kid. And
Yeah.
he's been in the league 5 years. He's
Yeah.
gone through a major injury. The kid's done a lot of growing up,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
he's out there being a real leader. And
Yes.
I think the fans of Utah are going to grasp that pretty quick. What was your reaction? And first off, you talk about how you protected your guys as a player.
Yeah.
And then I kind of saw that with you as a GM when all the rumors are going around and nobody knows what's going on. and you take the flight and you're like, hey, I'm gonna talk to my guys, and I'm gonna protect my guy. First priority is my family, my guys, and we're gonna
Yeah.
say, hey, this is what's happening. Can you, how much of that can you even take us through when it was all kind of actually coming to
Yeah.
fruition that you were going to be in Utah?
Well, that was a hard moment for our organization, for everybody, in the sense that they didn't, there's uncertainty. When there's uncertainty, everybody's on edge, from players to staff and to coaches, and everybody's on edge. So, I think my words are just trying, to make sure that I could comfort our staff and our players, and make sure they had an understanding of a little bit what was going on. Without revealing too much. And I think that's what I tried to do that day. It's not a perfect world, obviously, and it was a difficult situation for the NHL. It was a difficult situation for Brian Smith and his group. It was a difficult situation for our players and our fans. So, it's one of those ones. I don't think you're gonna, when you go into that room, I don't think can't win on that one, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you certainly got to do the right thing, and I've tried to do that my course of my career, whether as a player, coach, or in management, try and do the right thing. So that's what I try to do. I'm not sure if I was that successful, but it was a good day in some ways and a tough day in other ways.
I can't even imagine what it was like to be in your spot, but I can tell you as an outsider that also knows a lot of people on the inside,
Yeah,
you did the right thing, and I think you were successful in what you did. I think everybody realized right then. Anybody that, like, I didn't know you at the time, I knew of you,
yeah.
but I was like, that's a quality guy. That's the type of guy. I see why you're in the spot you're in. Um, Tell us about then the next step. All of a sudden, everything's a whirlwind, and you're
Yeah.
in. I saw you walking around as the plane came. And you guys were coming to Utah, and you get to that pep rally. Can you walk us through what your experience was like for that a little bit?
Well, I was filled with emotion. It was a pretty emotional day for us, just to be able to kind of get all your players off the plane and walk into that hangar with all the kids chanting. I think they're chanting Yetis, Yetis. They were all, they broke. As a kid, I didn't enjoy school. I didn't enjoy 1 minute of it. So I asked one of the kids, "Did you have school today?" He says, "Yeah, we did, but we didn't go. We came here." I said, "Oh, now I really like you." That would have been a
That's
dream come
amazing.
true for me as a kid. So, they were chanting and everything, and it was great. I mean, there's just so much energy. And then, we went into the arena, and it was sold out. People were going crazy, and you walk out there, and the floor is filled, the stadium's filled, and the energy was just absolutely crazy in the building. And it was a special day for us because, I think one of the things is you never know. There's uncertainty of who's going to show up at the rink, and the support, how loud it was. It was crazy. It was just it's a special day. I'll never forget that day.
No, it's amazing. I'll never forget it either. All right, I know I'm running out of time. I have one more question.
Yeah.
Do you have a team name that you would like to see the Utah team be called? You've
Um,
seen the Final Four, right? I think there's Final Four.
yeah. Am I allowed to answer that one? I don't
Sure.
know.
What's the worst that could happen? We could edit it
Yeah.
out.
Well, I'm just gonna tell you. I won't tell you the name, but I'll tell you, the kids are picking the name that I love,
Okay.
and they're gonna drive it home. And I really think the kids that are 12, 13, 14, I think, or even younger, they're picking the name, and I think that's a great thing, because when they're taking their kids to go watch us play, they're gonna feel responsible about naming it. But they're driving the bus in that one.
Yeah, I would agree with you. All right, Bill, I know I kept you longer than I was supposed to. All I
Yeah.
can say is I really appreciate your time. I hope to get you on the show in the future. Is there anything else you'd like to say to the fans of Utah before I let you go?
Well, we're passionate behind the scenes. Our players, our management staff, our scouts, everybody, our coaching staff. You know, we're passionate people about bringing them the best team we can possibly be. Just have a little bit of patience with us. You're going to see great things from us. We're not the perfect team. We're not the Edmonton Oilers. right now. We're young, but if you give us some time, we're going to blow it out of the water for you. We're going to take it to a new level and in a team that you can be proud of for a long time.
Outstanding. That's a great way to leave it. Phil, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Jay. Much appreciated.
That is the Utah Puck Report.
Want to give a special thanks to Chipman Roofing. These are hockey people supporting the hockey community. It's Chipman Roofing. For all your roofing needs, just check out chipmanroofing.com. And if you like what you hear on the podcast, please leave a review, leave a rating. Wherever you listen to your podcast, make sure you give us a rating. Like to check out kslsports.com as well. There's going to be more hockey on there. As more hockey comes up, it's going to be always right there, kslsports.com. Big thanks to Madison Miller for putting up with us and making this thing work.